Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, I'm getting a thumbs up.
Very
All right, good. Well, I'm not seeing you, but I would want to say good to see you. I hope you've all been well since I met some of you in Weile, and the rest of you, I also hope that you've been having a good time making your videos. We're already a bit kind of behind on time, so I'm gonna kind of just jump right into it and present a little about some didactic reflections that I've had while watching across all your beautiful videos, and also some of the things that I would suggest you could think about moving forward. So the first thing, whoops, that is just to say you've all done a very great job. I think when I've been watching your videos, it's been funny. When I was in school, I was pretty bad at grammar. But when you see this community of you all using like present continuous, selective listening, there are all these words that you use. And it's funny because when I watch it, I feel that even though you're in very different contexts, there's a very clear sense that this is a very kind of clear, definite community, and I do appreciate that. Anyhow, jumping into it, I know many of you are already tired of me talking about this didactic diamond model, at least those of you who were in Weile. So I'm not going to explain it too much. I am, however, going to use it as a basis to provide a little feedback on some of the things that I noticed when I was watching the videos. And this is also just good tips, good formulations, best examples, best practice things that you can return to if you look at these slides after this, in case you want to, yeah, when you're making your videos. All right, these are the components of the didactic diamond model written in brutally small letters. I'm not going to go through it. You've already seen it before, and you can always return to these questions. But these are some of the questions that we have encouraged you to kind of use and integrate into your reflections. So one of the things that I noticed some of you did was that you were very good at kind of linking your practice to the actual learning conditions of the participants that you were teaching. And many of you, not all of you, do work with vulnerable student populations. And I think it's very important that you in your practices acknowledge that when you, for example, say, and these are all quotes from videos. I'm not going to mention any names. I've just picked them out because I thought they were good examples. This activity can be particularly helpful for this and this student population. This works well for mixed language backgrounds, kind of bringing in the students' backgrounds into your videos. So I think that's very important. Structural conditions, some of you mentioned that some activities would work very well with small groups of students. Others of you focus that say that the practice can be expanded. That's an important thing to note because when people are watching it from Germany, watching a video from Cyprus, well, they might have 20 students. Others might have 5. So thinking about kind of the size of the room, the amount of participants is a very useful thing to do. Speaking about resources, thinking about what time of the day the practice is going on. Some of you note that this exercise is excellent if your students are a bit tired. Something like that can be a very basic but important thing to know. And then also, of course, speaking about the, before and after exercise. So what has gone before, what's coming after, what is the kind of didactical or pedagogical place that this makes sense to use. Many of you say present exercises that are kind of in between more boring or formal learning exercises. So that's also something that's worth noting. All right, purpose and goals. Well, this is both in terms of the purposes more broadly, speaking about, for example, it's important to work with selective listening because ABC, this exercise can benefit learners very generally by XXX. And then more concrete goals to say in this practice or this activity, we're going to practice this, or it's intended for doing this. And then, of course, also reflecting on how this can be adapted, kind of like Jean-Marie was doing in the previous video, thinking about, well, could this be adapted for example, B2 learners? Yes, it can, by doing this and this. Those reflections are very important. In terms of the content, I noticed that a lot of you were very good at kind of thinking about both the more instructional, concrete parts of the exercise. So let's say you want to work with selective listening. Well, how do you want to work with selective listening? I've chosen to do this by focusing on the story of, I know one of you focused on a story of Santa Claus because it was Christmas, right? So really focusing on kind of that we as viewers get to see how your purposes are translated into concrete content. Some of you focused on repetition, how important that is. That's also something that might be very helpful to do. How do the students work? What are the forms of participation, to use a formal word? Is it group work, individual work, 2 and 2? We want to know those things. Finally, in terms of the process, many of you focus on kind of the movements throughout the practice in terms of how the participants work, in terms of where do you write the exercise? Is it written on the blackboard? Why is it written on the blackboard? One of you note that having it on a blackboard or any other kind of written material is good because the students can continuously see, why am I doing this? And be reminded of that. So those kinds of reflections are important because if you didn't say that, you might as well see the practice and then just assume that the students would have gotten it. So again, really explain all those small things and use the didactic model to kind of do that. In terms of evaluation, I think this is probably the one with where I could find the fewest examples. Also because a lot of the evaluation doesn't fit very well into the more kind of presenting model of the clipboard. By saying that, I mean that the evaluation very much focuses on your own learning. How have you been sharing with colleagues? And how have you followed up on your practice, not only after the practice, but also in the longer run? So evaluation also speaks to the broader process. Examples of this is, for example, some of the videos I heard someone say, one of the ways you really see if the exercise has worked, right? You can notice it has worked is when XXX. After the exercise, it can be a good idea to ask the students how they have learned something. So just building on all these reflections, I know it's very brief. You can always return to them as good examples. I just want to focus a bit on moving ahead, some of the things that we might want a little more of in terms of thinking how we can really strengthen our didactic reflections. There's always more to learn. So the first thing, as I already was saying, is that we really want to make it explicit how we move from A to B. It's not given that everyone knows how to form groups, how to organize the room in the way that you assume is natural. So by that, I mean that many of you, even though you very beautifully illustrate the practice, many of you also say you can just, before you do this, you have to do this. It's very easy or it's very simple. And although it's very easy and simple for you, that doesn't mean it's very easy and simple for colleagues watching it somewhere else. So really think about avoiding telling, but showing. How do I actually create these cards that I use? Is it good to use cardboard? Is it good to use paper? I mean, try to really get all the way across those reflections. Second thing is that the didactic reflection is also about your learning process. And one of the things that but I am of course biased because I think we all have to continue learning all the time. One of the things that I was missing was a bit more reflecting inward, thinking about both in terms of how this practice has taught you something, what you learn from your students when you're doing this, because as teachers, we're also always learning. And then the second thing would be how making the video has also been helpful to really learn something about the practice. And this would be a reflection that is especially good for the V-PPAL platform in the comments section. Finally, a thing that I do miss a little is to focus on your colleagues. Is this a good practice to develop with others? Can you get feedback on it? Can you bring it into a teacher team, etc.? All right, That's all I want to say since we were already short on time. Keep up the good work. I've been very, very impressed watching them. And yeah, hope you're all well.